would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You have a volunteer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All 7 board members are present. Commissioner Larry by telephone. First item on the agenda is the budget.
I'll start off by just giving you just a very quick overview of the budget. The general government budget is up by about $315,000. Over a third of that, close to 40% of that, is employee benefits. The jail budget is up by $335,000. Half of that is 2 lines. One is a capital project that we have to do, and the other is an increase in the inmate medical contract. So those are the major increases. We have used some fund balance again this year to offset. The end result is a 3.6% increase when you get to the bottom line for tax increase. That's opposed to 5.25% last year. That having been said, we looked at it as we went through all of the budget. There were a lot of things that we'd like to have had, should have had, but we put off. And so that having been said, we're ready for the presentation by the department heads.
Very good. First is Superior Court. Are any questions for the administrator? First up is Superior Court.
And I always come in for the Superior Court, even though I'm not technically the Superior Court. It's really about our witnesses. This is my favorite budget line to talk to you about because you can set this number at any number you like. You can make it $1, you can make it $100,000, whatever it is, I reimburse it with our extradition account. So if you make it $1, I'm going to run in the red the entire year, but we reimburse it. So whatever expenses come out of that line, there's a correlating revenue line that's going to just make it that. And then the other part of this budget is postage. This is when we mail checks to witnesses. We rarely do that. We try to issue the checks while they're here, but you can see, I think 2019 we expended $70, and this year was $22. So maybe we should take a half hour or so, look at these numbers. Nothing? Okay. All right. Give me a long night for you guys.
So far, so good. Questions for the district attorney on the Superior Court? Very nice. Commissioner Larry.
Just a question. Are we still, and maybe this is a question for a different section of the budget, but are we still on track to make sure that those that are incarcerated before their trial are getting a fair and speedy trial quickly? And this isn't an issue of the prosecutor, but just making sure that whatever resources are necessary to make sure that people have their day in court quickly enough so that they're not having to stay in jail because of this COVID garbage, that they're able to either be prosecuted and serve the term and get out, or be able to be acquitted as fast as possible within reason. Is that still, I remember you gave some presentation, Attorney Robinson, is that still the case, or are there more snags that we're dealing with at this point?
There are some procedural sort of issues. The first is the court isn't having jury trials right now. And so the final stage of a criminal process is for you to have a jury trial. We have been very diligent about identifying folks that we did not want to remain in custody, that we didn't think posed a great enough risk to the community, and try to keep their bail low enough or no bail at all and give them a contract to keep them out of being in custody. Ultimately, though, there are folks that are in custody because they pose a safety risk, and we need to have an opportunity for that jury trial. Right now, we have not had jury trials since March of 2020. The last order from the court indicated mid-October would be our first opportunity. And even then, the messages we're getting is that they're not sure how to select a jury because it means bringing 120 people into one space. We don't have a lot of space that would allow for social distancing and allow for the administering of that process. And then once you've picked your jury, having space for them to be able to hear the facts of the case and then deliberate in private, but with sufficient amount of space. There's a lot of issues surrounding that. It is a high priority for the criminal justice system. I've been a part of a lot of meetings where we've identified that issue, but the answer is right now, the final stage of the process hasn't been able to occur, and that has resulted in folks having to wait for their trial, and some of them are incarcerated.
Commissioner Roy.
I'm sorry.
We'll get-
Commissioner Larry.
Commissioner Roy is waving to Commissioner Larry if you have additional comments or questions.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I did have a question of if people, and I understand, that there is, from what I'm being told, diligent work and making sure people do have a day in court. I am deeply concerned, though, if people are not having a jury trial and they're stuck there because of the seriousness of the charges. I do have great concerns that people are not getting their day in court and their constitutional right to a fair and speedy trial. I know some of that's not under your control, Attorney Robinson. I want to see whatever we're doing. This is the budget time. This is the one time we really get to actually talk about some of these things. I would just, what can be done? Is this a legislature thing? Is it, because obviously we have people rioting in groups, in far larger groups than anything that we would have in the jury side. I feel that it's inappropriate for the court system to claim that this cannot be helped. People need to be able, it's a constitutional right for them to protest peacefully. Most of these are not peaceful protests, but there's also a constitutional right for a fair and speedy trial. And if they're willing to allow one to occur, even when they're violent, I think they should also be making sure that people are also getting into the halls of justice and out of them within a acceptable time. I don't think March 2020 is acceptable.
Commissioner, you asked the question if this is mostly a legislative matter.
I think it's a judicial matter, but I think it's a resource issue also.
Did you hear that, Commissioner?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear.
The district attorney said it was mostly a judicial matter and also a resource matter, being sorted out therefore by the courts. Commissioner Medora. Thank you. Commissioner Medora.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind us that we should probably try to stay focused on the budget conversation since it's a budget meeting, and we do have a meeting next time, and I'm sure District Attorney Robinson would be happy to talk about criminal justice issues. But right now, we have a task to focus on the budget and to work on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy.
So you said all of these expenses get reimbursed from where?
That comes out of my extradition account. And so it would be, and we're talking about 1005, right? The Superior Court budget.
Right. So I should see on the revenue funding sources side, essentially offsetting 11,000.
There absolutely should be a line that would,
I don't see that.
well, I know we are.
I would imagine it would be up in the 9,000 where
Witness fees.
witness fees. So do we want to move that up to 11,200 or, oh, you're saying postage isn't reimbursed? Okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure that we got that.
I had a question. I was wondering if you could explain the witness fees a bit,
Yeah,
in a
that's,
bit more depth.
that is statutorily required. When a witness is needed by the state, what we try to do is they have a very nominal stipend. It's actually not very much, about $15, and then mileage.
As much as a jury.
It is almost, folks, I think, we always say to them, well, you're not gonna retire early, but, we can't get you this. And so those fees are set by statute. They're required to be paid by the county. And then what happened was the legislature on the state level, my extradition account is funded by defaulted bail. So if somebody posts cash bail and they don't show up, that bail is defaulted and goes into the extradition account, which has a logical nexus because that's what we use to bring people back to court or back to our jurisdiction if they fled. They put in legislation that said the district attorney can use the extradition account to reimburse the counties for those witness fee expenses. And so essentially took a burden that was left with, placed upon the counties legislatively and gave us a means of reimbursing and alleviating that burden. So it was, and that was, 4 or 5 years ago, but it was actually, what I thought was very appropriate and very clever way to do it, to make sure that that cost wasn't just borne by the counties.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I could mention something.
Mr. Larry?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would point out, this is the budget meeting. We do have the authority to speak out on issues, and also understanding whether people are getting a fair and speedy trial is to the point, because if people are not getting a fair and speedy trial, either we need to consider whether we're cutting budgets to deal with that lack of things being dealt with, or on the converse, on the opposite, deciding to increase funding to make sure that people are getting their fair hearing in court. And commissioners do have the right to speak. This is the commissioners' meeting, so I strongly contest that assertion. I could not hear quite well, and we should have a Zoom meeting set up. That's not a reflection on the chair, but anyways, I want that to be clarified. Commissioners do have the right to speak, and we do have a reason to ask what's being spent and how and why. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions on Superior Court? Move on now to the Victim Advocate Restitution Specialist.
And the Victim Advocate Restitution Specialist used to be a grant position. It subsequently became a regular funded position, but it's reimbursed by 50%, 25% from Oxford and 25% from Franklin, so it's kept separate, but it's a pre-existing position that is kept separate because of the fact that the other 2 counties are contributing to it. So it's somewhat unique, held out separately.
Questions on the Victim Advocate?
So we get fully reimbursed for that as well, right?
50%.
That's what I thought. So, and the same with the EMI. So if we're getting 50% reimbursement, why are we budgeting 8751 in expenditures and
Because you're
estimating 8751 in revenues?
Well, that's a fair question. If you're saying, let me make sure we're looking at the same.
So I'm looking on the, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the expenditures. Sorry about that. Never mind.
Okay. Because what you said,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Should not happen. So
So we're estimating 55,000 in revenues from that.
that would be the, is that the Victim Witness Advocate grant or is that the restitution?
No, that's the victim witness advocate. Oh, you're saying the restitution grant?
That's, yeah, and it should be a grant. It should say,
Yeah. So I'm assuming the victim witness advocate grant of 55,000 estimated revenue.
that's coming from that's going to go to a different position. That's not the restitution clerk.
I thought we were talking about victim witness advocate right now.
Because the way it evolved, we talk about it as victim witness advocate, but I think we were talking about restitution clerk. Am I right about that? Which line number? are we?
Restitution is 9545, and that amounts 34,652. Down near the bottom.
Yeah, no, I know, I get that. Okay, so that one makes sense. Then my question is, I thought we were on the victim witness advocate one. I thought we were on, I thought we were on 1019, not 1013.
So 1013 though.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah, I'm
good on that one?
Yeah, I'm satisfied.
Okay. Is everybody else?
Very good. Move on to district attorney budget.
Okay, now, do you folks have the explanation?
Yes, they do.
Okay. So here, there is an ask, and that is that for 2 years, I have had a federally funded victim witness advocate or trial assistant working in the office. This was necessary based on the workload. At the same time, it was clear that the funding needed to come from somewhere, and so I sought a grant and obtained the grant. That grant is ending this fiscal year, and so I'm trying to put that position into the general fund so that we can keep the trial assistant position. I have slashed everything I could find to show you, that we're trying to do an offset. And by way of example, if you look at 3211, that was the internship line where we had $17,160. I've zeroed that out. If you take a look at 4675, you'll see a decrease of $23,090. I do have to tell you, this was a promised decrease when I wrote the grant almost 1.5 years ago now to purchase the new software we're going to use for our case management system, and it dramatically decreased the cost to the county for our case management software. We're changing from what was called Justware to now what's called Attorney Manager with tighter technology and allows to interface with the court. I wrote the grant for the entire state, but it made it so that we could do the conversion by the software, and that's what you're seeing reflected here. So cost savings, but I want to make clear how it got here and why it's there. And then if you take a look, the only other significant decrease would be in electricity. I actually think that's a product of the COVID-19 situation where folks were not in the office as much, so the AC and the heat wasn't being used as much. So I think it saved us some money. So ultimately, you can see, the reductions in the amount of 17,000 on one line, 3,500 on another, 23,000 on another. I've gotten rid of the cost for the interns, all in an effort to be able to keep this professional in the office and be able to provide these services to the victims that are involved in our cases. That is the primary expense that I'm asking for this year. That's why it's here. If you look, you'll see other areas where things have gone up. I don't want to be too hodgepodge about it, but if you look at 4015 for professional fees, that is actually that slight increase that you're seeing is the way we're billing for the new software. So we're no longer going to have our own independent license. We're licensing through an organization or consortium called MEDATS, and this is our portion of the software cost, the increase amount that you see there. Transcripts in 4080 have gone up $2,000. That's me just looking at how much we've paid the previous year and then trying to estimate what we're going to need for the following year. That fluctuates. It's like trying to read tea leaves. I can't tell you what it's going to be, but the more appeals, the more post-conviction reviews, the more transcripts we need. Miscellaneous professional services. This is actually, for a while, hospitals were not charging us for medical records when we asked for copies when folks were injured. We're now seeing the bills. So we've had to put an increase in because we're actually being asked to pay, and by statute, we're required to pay for those copies. I think the other increases that you'll note, the office lease is built in to the lease, so it has to go up per the original agreement. The printing and reproducing, which is line 5345, that is actually because we have a copier, and if we want to do a viewing, we can go look at the copier, but it's on its last legs, and I'm told that we've got to do something, and so that is a cost that copiers are not cheap, so it's $5,250, but that's why there's an increase in that line. Those are probably the more significant changes. I hope you can see the effort I made to not come in and say, can we just add a position and we're not going to do any cuts. At the same time, that role of a trial assistant, just so I can remind everybody, is somebody who is part paralegal, so they do all the documentation prep, they work with an attorney, and part victim witness advocate. They're the ones who contact and communicate with the victims and the officers or witnesses, make sure everybody's available for any hearings that need to take place, but also keeping them up to date on what's happening with their cases. And if that person's not in the office, if we don't have enough resources to do these, to provide these services, and those calls don't get made. And so we have a statutory obligation to do it, but it takes time and it takes resources. And right now, I'm not even confident we have sufficient, but going backwards certainly isn't going to help.
So what you're up against, the increase of 21 is actually very good. But let me ask you a question. Do you ever see the day coming when you can get rid of the statute and reference books and just do that strictly online?
I've already done it. The statute and reference books is, well, the only books we do get, actually, fair question. We do order Verticos, but that's done through the joint budget, I think. And this one, what you're seeing is a Westlaw subscription. So it is the online.
Okay, this is what it costs for the job.
That is,
Wow.
for the number of attorneys that we
Yeah.
have in the office to be able to access the research database.
Wow.
And then every year there's a 5% increase. That's what you're seeing on the increase line.
Okay.
But we did eliminate all the books. And when I say that, I'm thinking about, the books you normally see sitting behind attorneys when they're filming their commercials, with all the statutes annotated. We don't have those, but we do have these little paperback books that have a summary of all the criminal law. And maybe you're suggesting to me, hey, Andy, it's time to give that up. And
No.
they use
No, it's
the
just
attorneys cling to them like it's their security blanket in the courtroom because they want to look it up quickly. But I could say to them, hey, we've got wireless access in the courtroom. You can look it up on your computer,
No, it's just when you see 11,000, I guess I just assumed that was still printed material, but that is for your online subscription.
That's Westlaw.
Can't we just use Google for that for free?
It is funny you say that though, because when I'm looking up statutes, I do just look up Maine statutes and go straight to the legislative webpage and grab what I can. But what you can do with Westlaw though, is when somebody comes in with a November 1985 gross sexual assault, you need to see what the statute looked like at that time. And that's where it gets complicated. Just Google it. Then you need to compare it to drafts. But it is funny because some of it is there, and some of it isn't. And then Westlaw, what you find on the internet isn't always reliable, even though I always say to people, it's on the internet, it must be true. So you got to be careful what your source is
I
sometimes.
never dreamed Westlaw subscription for 1 year would be that price.
Yeah, now, we do have access to a lot of secondary sources, right? So ALR, treatises, criminal law treatises. And so when somebody comes in with an issue, we resort to going to those, seeing what the outlines are, and then start doing our research that way. So.
Further questions? Now we'll ask the attorney to move into the joint budget.
The joint budget, folks probably recall the majority of, there are some things that it just makes sense to combine all of the funds together, because don't forget what my office is a construct of a statute that creates a district. And so I am District 3, and so we exist as an entity as far as the statute is concerned, but it's comprised of our counties. But there are some areas where we just have common expenses. The conference, when it occurs, we just pull all the money together to pay for the hotels for each of the respective attorneys, then have each county contribute to their attorneys, and victim witness advocates and trial assistants, verticos, mileage that's happening when we're sending attorneys to different counties to cover for each other, those kind of expenses. So that's what the joint budget reflects. And just take a quick look real quick. I think I received an amended budget right when it came in, but I'm having trouble finding the joint budget. Thank you, Larry. So you'll see these rates are usually pretty much set by amounts and necessities. So the insurance liability is just the head count, how many attorneys for each county then contribute towards the insurance premium that we receive. You'll see there's the books and periodicals we talked about and all the other expenses. Does anybody have any questions about the joint budget? Because I will just keep rambling on.
Appreciate your breakdown of it.
Thank you.
No questions? We'll move on to the victim witness advocate grant.
And that, I think, is where Commissioner Roy was focusing attention with that one revenue line. And what that is every year we get a federal grant for $55,000 to help fund victim witness advocates. A third of it goes to each county. And so the reason why that position is sitting in a separate line item is because it's a grant funded or partially grant funded. And so we keep it separate to be able to identify it when the revenue funds come in. So it's an existing position. It's, the rest, the trial assistant that I talk about. This is one of those positions that I'm talking about, and it's a third of it is funded by that grant.
Good. Any more questions for District Attorney Robinson? You're off the hook.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Thank you
all.
very much,
Thank
District
you.
Attorney.
It's always a pleasure. I am, by the way, willing to come back and talk about some of the other issues that were originally discussed. If we want to set time for a workshop or something on that. And if you want to put a quick plug, not sure we all have the same understanding of what a speedy trial is as far as the U.S. Supreme Court when it's interpreting the Constitution. So that is a conversation we can have someday.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you for your hard work and for cutting in so many different areas. That's very commendable.
Thank you. Good night all.
Good night,
Thank
now.
you.
Next is Registry of Deeds. Welcome.
Hi.
Well, my budget's pretty simple. I just have little things that I can point out to you. On my telephone line, I took out $100. On my 4630, 1065, 4630, that was at $400 and I increased it by $380. But I took that money from my office supply line. So if you look at the office supply line, it balances it out. Because in the office supply line, I only have 2,000 in there instead of 2,800 now. On the microfilm line, I was able to take 500 off that one. The postage, I was able to take 300 off of it. And printing and reproducing, I was able to take 200. But other than that, it's the same stuff. And you're really busy.
All right.
This COVID hasn't slowed the office down at all. And my staff has been great through this whole thing, just so you know that. They've been unbelievable with the busyness that we've had. I thought it would be a little slower, but it was a little slow, I'd say, in the beginning of April, but then not for long. Oh my God. But that's my budget. Any questions?
We appreciate everything you've had to do and hoops you've had to jump through and keeping the registry open.
Yeah, we did that.
It
Thank you.
looks like a pretty good budget too.
Thank you.
Questions? Adam?
When the auditor was here, he made the suggestion of an end user fee for the deeds. Now, in my industry, that's terrible for me because I would be paying it every day. But I do understand the proposal and I do see the value in it. Putting on a different hat as a county commissioner, I can see the value of it. And I know other counties have tried it. I think one got a lot of pushback in the middle of the trial period. From where you sit working in that office, what's your opinion of that? It's like being a child, like when someone goes on your website before they can print off a deed, there would be like I think York tried a $2 charge.
Well, I don't think we can do anything with that, because that's in legislation now that it's all free. Remember that whole Make Image, were you on when that happened? That whole Make Image, and then you get 500 copies for free. You log in, you go in as a visitor. If you log in as a visitor in my understanding, you get 500 copies for free, and there's no watermark. If you just go in and print just the free access, there is a watermark. But after you've gotten your 500, then it's 50 cents a page, but I believe that's in legislature. I don't want to overstep or, but I don't know if we can do that legally. I would have to.
And York tried it, and I think they got a lot of pushback because it was only a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden I logged on, and the $2 fee was gone. But
I don't know,
Because it may have been because it's illegal.
I'm not sure. And there may be ways around it. When we started this whole thing with the e-files, when people use the e-files and they file their documents electronically now, they have these companies that they go through. I'll say Simplifile, for example. They have to pay a yearly fee, an annual fee for that. Plus they pay per document an additional fee when they record it. My question was, when this whole mess started, was how come we're not doing that as a county, as an association? And I believe it had to do with the finance part of it, the money coming in, because Simplify guarantees that money, whether it's available in that person's account or not. Simplify guarantees, and I think there was a little bit of pushback on that part, because there was no one to guarantee the money. So, but it would have been nice to have that, especially now. Oh my gosh.
Mr. Roy?
Where are we at with deeds, fees, and transfer taxes to date? Just kind of a ballpark $100,000 range.
As of yesterday, I think it was I think we're at 380.
380.
Somewhere in there. You'll have a breakdown of all of the revenues next week.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering, because as far as the estimated revenues are concerned, we're essentially estimating basically flat. I'm wondering if that should be estimated a little bit more in revenues or not. Are you doing that just for being conservative?
We're budgeting 25,000 more next year.
Yeah.
I don't like to
Okay.
budget higher than what we're gonna get.
Yeah. But how well I don't remember from looking at the financial last year for FY19, how well did we come in compared to estimated revenues for 19? Do you remember? Is it above?
We'll have to look.
Yeah.
We'll get that for you.
I'm just saying, I'm just suggesting it's one area where if we want to be a little less conservative, not crazy, but, if people want to reduce the tax levy, those are the areas that we would want to look at. I know there's a tendency generally to underestimate revenues, especially these types of revenues, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they stopped all the foreclosures from coming in.
Right.
Who knows what's gonna happen in the next couple months when it's not allowed.
Right.
And they can start processing them, because my foreclosures, they are down, and so on court documents, which starts the foreclosures. But my concern is what's gonna happen when it's okay to do it now. But the recordings are like 380, like Barry said.
Okay.
The fees that Commissioner Christner referred to, if you start them out at $10, and then after 2 weeks drop them to 2, people will think they're getting a deal.
Well, you would bear the brunt of that, because I remember when the other county did do it, everybody would call and they were upset about it because they were used to getting them
Yeah.
for free for so long.
I mean, it gets to a point, most of the attorneys that are online doing that, I want to say it's 6 months, probably doesn't even last that long, and now they're paying. They're paying their 50 cents a page because they've run out of their 500. So we are getting revenues, not like we used to, no. Because we used to charge $1 a page, they used to pay, to be on the website and all that. But then when people start wanting to sue you because it's supposed to be free, it's public information, well, Google's public too, but some stuff you have to pay for. But I guess it doesn't.
You have one of the more user-friendly websites
Thank you.
around.
I appreciate that. We try hard.
Now, though, if we could search a list of all the deeds in a particular town in a date range, I would be very happy. But that is not.
Well, it is, but it's cumbersome.
It doesn't work. I use Brown Tech a lot. I use York counties, and I'm not a fan of Brown Tech, but it is leaps and bounds beyond what it was in the past. So.
What would it take to satisfy your desire on that?
Oh, I've expressed my desire to Brown Tech a few times. Yeah, it's just it's cumbersome, but York County has a little bit of a better search function in their registry of deeds. But I am not a typical user, so I think my perspective is limited. For utility, I'm a power user, I guess. I go on it a lot, but my function is different. So forget about me.
If there's no further questions, we thank the registrar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next registrar.
Evening. So having the pleasure of the smallest budget in the county, I'll do a brief overview of the changes. First off, I want to point out an error on line 1070-4836. 4835, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And that should be $3,000, not zero.
3,000.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, deal the deal.
That's right. So if you go to the top, some of the changes, or the changes made, the mileage, which is 4105, that was elevated for last year, anticipating and meeting the needs for extra register meetings for the new probate code. And so I dropped that back down to 200. The software, hardware maintenance agreement, that's for our version of Brown Tech, the equivalent to the deeds online service, and our portion, so that went up $50 to $2,550. And the insurance liability, as you can see over the past few years, it has gone up, and I guesstimated a percentage, which is modest, which I think should accommodate that. Going down to the dues, these are the dues for the judge and myself as registered for state associations, and that went up a modest $75. And then on the second page, you'll notice in the printing and reproducing that year to date, nothing was budgeted for that in 2020, and the year to date it has an expense of $557.27. And what that is the consolidation of all of our printing supplies, which Dave Cody had facilitated for us, striking us a better
rate for these supplies. And so we all pay a monthly average into a general fund. And I didn't want to, and so that number is actually, if you look at office supplies, it's going to be coming out of there, the line item 5335. So it's not an extra incurred thing, but that's where the printing supplies had come from before. Next year, when we do the budget, we'll have a realistic idea of what to put for that line item. Yes, sir.
Is your court-appointed attorneys down so much because of COVID?
Well, you
Or
know,
is it
it's an enigma.
Invoices yet?
And so, just a little refresher, what comes out of that line is not only legal fees for people that are indigent, that can't afford their own lawyers, that by statute we're required to pay, but also transcribers, interpreters, guardian ad litems, and so another thing, you know, to bring to your attention, I'm glad you mentioned that, Commissioner, because there's a bill before the legislature. It was voted out of committee, ought to pass, and this judiciary, and it's LD 531, and it's basically an act to provide counsel for a person who is the subject of an adult guardianship, conservatorship, or other protective arrangement proceeding. And so essentially, if a respondent is not represented by an attorney, the court shall appoint an attorney to represent the respondent in a proceeding on a petition under section 5-302. It is, you know, our Kathy Ayers from Kennebec County, who she's very active at the table, and you know, this is not a bill that we support. What's going to happen with it, don't know. With the legislature fighting on whether or not to come back. If they come back and all these bills come up, you know, whether, you know, they obviously they're not in agreement about coming back, you know, the Republicans and the Democrats. But if the governor were to bring them back in and they had an opportunity to vote on these, you know, I have no idea. But I'm adamantly opposed to it. I know Judge Dubois is as well, because there are provisions already in statute for people to be appointed attorneys that cannot afford them in such proceedings. So stay tuned. And to further address your question, Commissioner, you know, looking at going back to 2009, what was appropriated and what was expended for the court-appointed attorneys. And so I know that in 2016, it was $10,679. In 2015, it was $3,000. So
it goes up and down.
It does fluctuate, but the fact of the matter is that you could opt not to fund that line to that. You know, we asked you last year to raise it to $25,000 because of changes in the new probate code, where more people we're required to pay for more legal fees for people. Period. And you know, have we seen that reflected yet? Yes and no. I was talking with Julie earlier in preparing this budget. I'm like, all right, Julie, where are we at with this? And you know, year to date we have $1,651, but I know that in the pipeline there are several cases where, you know, we're not only just paying for one parent that is indigent, maybe, you know, probably incarcerated, and they're looking at the, you know, termination of their parental rights, you know, in adoption cases or whatnot. And these are people they deserve to have attorneys in such serious cases, to be sure. But so my point being, Commissioner, is that we're not paying for just one lawyer, we're paying for two in one case. Mm-hmm. So
I think what we could do year, the unexpended balance in that line, if after 1 year, you know, like last year, we had 14,000, and this year we budgeted 25. If we end up with, you know, whatever, only 2,000 or maybe $5,000, we should set aside, as commissioners, we should set aside that additional 20,000 in reserve, so that in future years, we don't necessarily have to constantly be like, well, I don't know what the fee is gonna be, we can budget more appropriately. So that if in a particular year we go over that budget, we can pull from that reserve to cover that amount.
In theory, I certainly like that idea.
Yeah.
I would defer to Barry in the overall budget process.
It's just an idea.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're in the pickle that you're in, where you're like, I don't know what my fees are gonna be. I mean, it could be high, could be low. This is not something that's like
Right.
supplies where we know or have a good idea what it's gonna be for you.
Exactly, and I would love to be able to come forth and say, this is, you know, a constant, and this is what we're looking at, and this is what we can anticipate within, even a few $1,000s would be nice, right? But with, you know, the legislature putting forth, you know, new proposed legislation that, you know, could just exponentially, you know, blow the extra 10,000 that we allotted last year to that line item out of the water, it's unsettling, to be sure, you know.
Mr. Reynolds, it sounds like, I did not realize this until you talked more in detail about the court-appointed attorney, but in other areas of the judicial system, it goes through the Maine Indigent Legal Services and it gets decided on by a judge to appoint an attorney. But it sounds like that fund isn't available to people in probate.
Not in the county yet.
Oh.
No. And so the judge does oftentimes, you know, there's requirements that, you know, he has to, you know, appoint for an attorney. If maybe, getting back to the visitors, like for adult guardianships, you know, per statute, the judge has to appoint a visitor, and these are professionals that go out and meet with the respondent and the petitioner to assess the situation and provide ultimately a report. And the point in mentioning this is the fact that with the new code, in these reports, it is not only with the new statute required, but people are asked point blank, are you aware that you have the right to an attorney and that one can be provided? You can't, you know, so, you know, not that I'm against people having legal representation that can't afford it, but it's different now than it was.
Very good, thank you.
I'll end by, the registrar and I had a conversation this afternoon, and we had discussed the 3,000 needs to go back in there, but I happened to notice my pet peeve, which was, if you look at the bottom line, is 184,756 and 1 cent. And I accused him of putting the 1 cent in there so you'd have something to cut.
Thank you, folks.
Amen.
Thank you.
To soil conservation.
Good evening, everyone.
Commissioner Larry?
Could you save copies of whatever's handed out today, please, for me? If you would be so kind as just to save a copy of it in the budget book, and I could meet with you sometime when it's convenient, just pick that up, please. I'd just like to be able to get table copies of whatever is being handed out, please,
Sure,
if possible.
absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Continue, please.
Good evening. I printed out corrected versions of this. After I sent this over, I got an email from the DEP where you see in the income column down at the events, I had it at 0. We had all of our programming and major events since lockdown occurred in March canceled or postponed. And I wanted to be prudent in assuming that we may not have any events that bring in income for us. And it turns out that the DEP, we host 2 or 3 a year of the erosion control workshops in Androscoggin County, and they bring in a lot of money for us. And it looks like they will be hosting these workshops. Instead of just 2 at 6 with 60, 70 people, it'll be, I think they're allowing 15 people per event, so we'll probably have several of them. So we are planning on doing that, and we'll probably do more. It's so uncertain that I didn't want to project that we'd be making more than we really will. As you can imagine, a lot of our programming and planning for 2020 was thwarted with COVID. All of our events were canceled, our plant sale, our trout sale. We did manage to have a couple of events earlier in this winter. I've put the plant sale and trout sale for 2021 projected to make a little bit less than we normally would, with some ambition that things might clear up by next spring. And because of teleworking and things like that, my hours have been cut just a little bit. Instead of 40, I'm typically at 30 these days, and this projected budget shows that. And also with the project assistant at working 30 hours, we had I think they were concerned about job security. Our event project assistant left us a little while after lockdown happened. I think they were concerned that they might not have work in the future with events being canceled, but we do have a job posting listed. We're kind of slowly acquiring resumes and trying to figure out the best time, place, and circumstance to bring somebody new on and train them. But we're requesting the same amount that we normally would so that we can be prepared to hire someone new and pay them a livable wage, and plan ahead so that once everything clears up and that we have the green light to host events and continue on doing the things that we had planned, we can hit the ground running without being in the red or having to worry about funding. We had a lot of plans as well we had a lot of things planned with schools and in both Androscoggin and Saginaw County, and obviously all of that stuff got canceled. But we're looking ahead and hoping that things clear up for 2021. If you have any questions.
Commissioner Bedore has a question.
Hi, Jocelyn, right?
Mackenzie, Jocelyn left us a couple of years. Yeah,
Okay, right.
that's all right.
Could you give us a brief description of your organizational structure? Like, you guys have a board or something?
We do. We have an elected board of officials that they're community members. It's a volunteer-based board. I believe all of them right now are farmers. So that makes up our board. A lot of the conservation districts around the state are made up of typical community members like that, foresters, people on lake associations, things like that. And they've actually been they're very busy this time of year because of their work. But I think we have 5 board members right now, and one of them is also the county conservationist with the NRCS, the National Resources Conservation Service, who we work alongside with. We have an agreement with them. They provide us with our office space, and in exchange, we have an agreement with them where we answer phone calls, emails, do site visit with them, and provide support for them as well.
Further questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, hold on, Commissioner Larry.
just because it's hard to hear, is the 2021 proposed amount requested 14,000 as well as it was last year? I think that's what I heard, but I couldn't tell for certain.
Yes, we're requesting the same.
Yeah, just in the affirmative.
Okay, and there's was there any consideration given to reducing that amount due to constrained county and state and city budgets, town budgets at this time?
Oh, is that
He's asking if
addressed to
in
me
the
or?
preparation of the budget, was there consideration given to the possible constraints that the towns and municipalities may have in the upcoming months?
I considered that, considering the state of things. I think that everyone's probably pinching because of big changes and having to cut things back. And, you know, we're happy to work with whatever suits the county best. You know, we care about the greater good for the county as a whole. And, you know, we're willing to roll with the punches and make things work and stay afloat no matter what.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Western Maine Transportation.
Good evening. Hope
Good evening.
everybody's staying well.
All right.
I'll try to be as efficient as I can. Did everybody have a chance to read over the paperwork we sent in? No? Okay.
They just got it today.
Oh, okay. So, I guess the first place I'll start is to say that so far during the pandemic, we've been able to maintain partial or full operation with our county operations, including keeping the Lisbon connection up. The green line was up, although it had a run trimmed off of it. It is now back to full operation. Our local last mile service that we run outside of the time or area of the city link stayed up and running as needed. So we're pretty happy with the fact that we've been able to continue to provide essential transportation for the people who needed it. New information before I get to the request is that we have started pilot services in response to both requests and information from our transit study on Tuesdays. We're now running from Mechanic Falls, Minot, and Poland into Lewiston, Auburn. Wednesdays, Sabattis, and on Thursdays, Green and Leeds. These have not been promoted yet because they still have their training wheels on, and we look forward to starting to talk about that, I can say that, in the very near future, when people have the bandwidth to understand what's going on. Last year, you all were kind enough to fund Western Maine Transportation Services for $40,000. That was reduced from the previous year. We are back to request the same amount this year. Again, the services that benefit from this are the Green Line, which is the commuter that runs from Farmington all the way down through Wilton J, and then picks up in Livermore Falls, Livermore, Turner, and comes in, brings people to work, it brings people to shopping and other services, healthcare, of course. It funds the local public demand response service in Livermore Falls, which is connected with the service in Farmington, but obviously there's a county line there. It's providing bus service outside of the city link routes in the Twin Cities. A lot of that has to do with getting people to work. It also has to do with last mile transit if someone's coming down on the Green Line and needs to get somewhere not served by a city link. We started a renewed service from Norway South Paris in Mechanic Falls and Lewiston, Auburn. There is a hiatus on that, but again, we're picking that up with the Tuesday run, Mechanic Falls, Minot, and Poland. We simply weren't having the ridership coming in from Oxford Hills for that for right now. And the Blue Line pilot commuter service continues, and that will be a full service starting in September as our federal funding aligns with resources and everything to allow that to start in earnest. That is still very well subscribed. We're taking between 5 and 8 people a day on that between Lewiston, Auburn, and Bath, and will include Brunswick on that in the future. That is the status of where we are and what we're doing. And again, we are requesting $40,000 again, if that is at all possible.
Thank you, Mr. Zernos.
Thank
Questions
you.
for Commissioner Moore?
Generally, what's your experience during economic downturns? Is it increased ridership or is it decreased ridership?
Well, this has been a little different. Generally, during economic downturns, ridership goes up because people have less ability to afford operation of a personal vehicle. Right now, everyone's still kind of staying at home, so the ridership has been down. As reopening occurs, hopefully we'll be able to do that successfully and we won't see another hard shutdown. We would anticipate that ridership would go up again because people will be recovering and trying to get reestablished. But my crystal ball is very foggy on that.
Commissioner Kelly?
Has your fee schedule changed at all over the course of the year?
Not over this year, no.
And this is mostly, but not entirely elderly used?
No, it's open to the public. I would say, we were just having this conversation about part of our service. I would say that for down here, I'd estimate it's about half and half elderly and others. Elsewhere up toward Farmington, it's about 75 to 80% elderly. In the Rumford area, oddly enough, it's about 30% elderly and everybody else is younger. But honestly, we see changes in demographics of our ridership on an almost annual basis, and the reasons can vary as widely as the demographic.
Thank you.
Good question.
And what's the status of your fleet?
Right now, the fleet's doing really well. We have one particular group of buses that are well beyond their service life. And the state's been having issues being able to take care of that, but that doesn't affect Androscoggin County. The paratransit fleet, which is the demand response fleet, is doing okay. CityLink is outside of the discussion here, but they've been doing fine as well.
That's not the discussion because
it's not funded through our request. That's Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee.
yeah.
So I would say, by and large, except for the Brunswick Explorer service, which again doesn't apply here, we're doing okay. Thank you for the question, though. Because yeah, a couple of years ago it was dire.
And I mean, I personally, I value the service, or at least I see the value in the service, and so I want to make sure that you're asking enough that can
Thank
help
you.
to manage that.
The state has been very good in terms of supplying. Well, we get 80% from the feds. The state's been also helping us with some additional revenue for capital expenditures. That difference from the operating expenses, and that's the majority of what we come to the county for.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Medora has the floor, and then we'll come to you, Commissioner Larry.
Thank you for joining us today. One of the things beyond the need for transportation in Androscoggin County, because we are a rural community, and also I have seen, anecdotally, a lot of people on the route to Farmington through Androscoggin County. So it seems like it has done well, even for just getting started too, because it's one of those things that it takes a while to establish. So I think that to me, the money that we've given to Western Maine seems like it has been put to good use, especially your lean operation over there, and pretty similar, I guess, to the way Androscoggin County operates, I think, to some extent. One of the things I found compelling about your ask last time was the matching funds by the federal government. Was wondering if you would touch on that again.
Sure, thank you. That's a terrific segue for this. For every dollar we get from the county, we get at least $1 back from the feds. It's usually much more than that. So it is an investment that sees an immediate return, and it provides the ability to get people where they're going. Thank you for your comment too about the Green Line and its use, and yes, we are seeing good numbers.
And I think, sorry, just to add on, I think that as time goes on, we may find that people, with as the register of deeds mentioned, with foreclosures coming to and other bills coming due for a lot of households that have been made to pay due to federal unemployment benefits and whatnot, that people will be feeling feeling the pinch increasingly more over the course of the year. And I think access to transportation to get to a job and healthcare and education, whether it's retooling for their next job, is going to be increasingly important in the coming year.
One other thing, you had mentioned time to ramp up. In the industry, it's considered a 3-year start to optimized ridership ramp up.
Commissioner Larry.
Oh, Commissioner Larry, you're-
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, thank you, Mr. Zerhorst, for speaking today. 3 questions. How many rides in Androscoggin County provided this past budget year? What are your thoughts on, is there really a need for this service in Androscoggin County? I mean, Androscoggin County, would you consider it a underserved, low-income county, or they're not as prosperous as the county? Is this really necessary?
I think there are 2 answers to that, Commissioner Larry. I'm sorry you can't be here tonight. The first answer is that the service is not necessarily intended specifically for the underserved population. Yes, in Androscoggin County, there are pockets of underserved individuals, and certainly we want to support them. We want to support the elderly, the disabled, and we want to support people like you and I, who may be fully able-bodied and have good jobs. There is a trend nationwide where it is seen as more acceptable for people to be taking public transit, and we're starting to see that here. So it's a 2-sided answer, but I'm glad to say that both sides point to increased ridership.
How many rides are being provided in Androscoggin County this past year? And also, just to clarify, you said at least for every $1 Androscoggin County spends, we get at least $1
At
for matching
least.
grants. Is that
At least,
correct?
correct. The total ridership from fiscal year 2019 was 223,975. And when you get your packet that you requested from the chair or from Mr. Post, you'll see the numbers broken out by town on our request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kelly.
I would really appreciate more detail as far as your budget as an organization. A revenue that you receive from various communities, matching funds from the federal government, your expenditures, revenue, so on and so forth. I feel as though we don't have very much detail as far as that's concerned.
No, you don't.
Any way that we
It wasn't requested, and we can certainly provide it.
I would appreciate that.
Sure. In fact, we think we've just had our audited financials returned from R.H.R. Smith, who also does them here, and we'd be glad to provide a quick snapshot version of that to you.
That would be great.
Sure.
Yeah, since you're here and there's no one waiting after you, I thought maybe we could follow up with that question and you could talk a little bit about your governing organization and what that's like and who's on your board.
Sure. So we have a board, and I believe we currently have 10 members. Our board chair is Kurt Schaub, who is the town manager of Turner. Also on the board is Rhonda Irish, town manager in Wilton, and Dave Coda, town manager in Carabasset Valley. Dave Brooks, former police chief in Lisbon is on the board. Jolene Lovejoy, who has served as a guardian ad litem and has had numerous political forays in the Rumford area, is on our board. Who am I forgetting here? I know I'm forgetting a couple of people, but it's a good board. We are looking to expand the board. There's a couple of positions that are not filled currently. We've had, as many organizations have had difficulty recruiting people because they don't have time. But that gives you an idea of who's on the board right now. And we are a nonprofit, 501c3. We were incorporated in 1976 and later granted statute as a regional transit corporation, which technically allows us all the rights and privileges of a municipality, except that we can't tax, we can't bond, and we can't take property by eminent domain.
Yeah, one more question. I don't want to go too far on this one, but I think it's important to understand what the impact would be of Androscoggin County's say contribution to Western Maine. It sounds like you guys have used the money that we put forth to expand the ridership opportunities in Androscoggin County. And as you said, the rollout for some of those lines are years. And then even despite that, they have experienced good ridership so far. So on the flip side, if say Androscoggin County did not support or did not contribute to Western Maine transportation in this year, what would that mean for your organization?
The organization per se would move forward. However, the services provided in the county would be reduced commensurate with the cutback in the funding. We're on very good fiscal footing, but we can't operate at a deficit. The prior ability for the state to make up for losses that were not covered, as you know, is not there. You know, there is a tighter and tighter budget, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's projected loss that is going to completely strip any flexibility away from most discretionary funding, I guess what we'd call it in the state. So services would have to be cut, and it would have to be cut pretty drastically. The $40,000 request is not made lightly. If we wanted to get exact, I think that the amount was something like 41,500 and some odd and 1 cent, just because I'm sitting next to Larry. But so it is not a request made lightly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Larry.
On the converse, I feel that when I've seen these buses, most of the time they have been empty, or 2 or 3 people at max on them in Lewiston, Auburn. So I'm kind of concerned about the actual effectiveness of this program. What is Western Maine Transportation Service getting funds from federal, state, county, and city, and other sources as well?
The way it works, Commissioner Larry, is that we have to raise a certain amount of money locally. In this case, for all the towns in Androscoggin County, the funding is through the county. We do not go to individual towns to fund the services we're asking the county to fund. Once we get the funding from the county, we're able to apply for matching federal grants. Occasionally, the state will kick additional funding in, but it is only because we have the county funding. It is what they refer to as a required local match. Matching model, anybody who's had to deal with it knows it can be pretty messy. It's based on a reimbursement where you have to both prove that you got the funding from the local source, and then you have to prove that you've expended it before you get that reimbursement from the feds. I hope that answered the question.
All right, Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Madore.
Because Commissioner Larry, asked the question, maybe it's worthwhile to reiterate the difference between the City Link or the Lewiston Auburn, your organization there versus the request here.
Sure. Western Maine Transportation Services is the contract operator for Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee, but it is LATC's purview to operate the CityLink bus service, the purple buses that you see in and around Lewiston Auburn. And it is a unique service, uniquely funded. Actually, LATC is referred to as a direct recipient. They actually go directly to the feds for their funding. And the two cities, Lewiston and Auburn, have an interlocal agreement whereby they provide a certain amount of money to fund that service. It's operated out of Avcog, but we have been the successful bidder to operate that system, but it's funded completely differently. We, on the other hand, are what they refer to as an indirect recipient. We go through the Maine DOT to draw down our federal funds, and that relieves a tremendous amount of administrative burden from us, which is good and saves us a lot of money.
So are you saying that you're no longer approaching individual communities and asking for funds? Because I've seen that done before.
Right, no. The only time that you would, okay, I do need to clarify that. We do have a specific agreement with the town of Lisbon. That's a contract service to operate the Lisbon connection. Other than that, no, we do not approach any other towns in the county.
Thank you.
Thank you, good question.
For example, the 212,000 ridership from Lewiston, is that on top of LATC or is that included?
No, that's on top of LATC.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not.
LATC typically runs around 120 to 160,000 riders a year.
So you're actually double or almost triple what LATC is.
Mm-hmm. Most of them are very short trips, but yeah.
Any more questions for Mr. Zerhoff? Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you all so much. Please stay well.
Thanks, sir.
Any comments from the public? Mr. Garvey? No? All right. So, that's it, Mr. Administrator?
No,
Commissioner Cook?
Unless there's something else to be said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.